Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We're back for another very exciting episode of Voices of Video. So, I am again your host, your moderator, Mark Donegan, and I am joined with Xavier Leclerc from Broad Peak. Xavier, good morning. Afternoon for you, I guess.
Good morning, good afternoon. Yeah, thanks for having me today, Mark. It's nice to be here.
All right, awesome. Well, yeah, we're here on Voices of Video, we really exist to hold engaging conversations. And I know today, I think anyone who's interested in what's going on in the world of fast advertising, new monetization models, all the shifts and the turns that are happening in the streaming space. Well, you're going to want to tune in for sure and stay tuned in. So why don't we start? Kick it off and tell us exactly what Broad Peak does. You're not exactly unknown in the space, but maybe there's someone who's not so familiar.
Sure. Yeah, a little refresh. So yeah, at Broadpeak, we basically specialize in storing and delivering video. That's where we started about 13 years ago, typically working with the large telcos. We work with some of the largest telcos in the world when it comes to powering their video distribution. And we've been doing it for a long time. So doing CDN, doing Origin Packager, Cloud DVR, multicast APR distribution as well. That's one of the specialties that we are known for. And recently, we've been working more and more with content providers, right? Hence, we're here today working with people who have content, but they don't have a network. So we've been getting more into delivery of advertising as well. And the sort of, a slightly different word from telco.
Interesting. Yeah. And so most of your clients and your customers are telcos. Is that, does that represent 80, 90, 100% of your customer base, or give us an idea of the
Yeah,
spread?
so that's a good place to start, right? So telcos still today represent about 90% of the revenues. We launched basically a SaaS proposition, right? Because what we have is carrier grade software to store and deliver video. We're very good at this. We've been doing it for a long time. But typically, we used to require a network to be able to deploy our solutions, right? So this works well with telcos, whether they cable, mobile, fixed line.
Sure.
That works well. But if you only have content and if you rely on public cloud infrastructure, it's not necessarily a great fit. So we launched a SaaS proposition about 18 months ago, and this has been growing steadily over the last year and a half now. We've focused first on personalization and hence all the work around advertising and targeted advertising.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's good. Well, I think this is a good place to start because we did put the hook out there. Those four letters, FAST, that it seems like everybody in the industry is talking about. And I know when you and I were preparing for this conversation, I raised that as a point. And not that I'm necessarily trying to take an opposite position, but we did have a very interesting discussion that I think we should bring the listeners into about whether fast really is the silver bullet, the secret to turning all of these platforms and services profitable, or whether it's just yet another business model, which by the way, I would argue, isn't this just called TV?
Have we recreated linear channels, right? With ads in the middle. Yeah.
I have a very firm view on that this is just called TV. So, we love in our industry acronyms and, but anyway, set that aside. So maybe you can kick it off here and give some thoughts and, tell us, what you're actually seeing. And, we're going to get to some success stories as well, but.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So fast for us is something that we learned along the way, right? So with the personalization proposition on our SaaS proposition, we've been doing some channel assembly, which is the mechanics basically to create fast channel, to recreate a live channel out of assets that you may already have. And it's interesting, right? Talking to customers, we got to understand, I think, a little bit better where fast really is coming from, right? And I would argue that fast the trend for fast has probably been triggered by cord cutting, right? Especially in North America, where people left basically pay TV bundles that used to include hundreds of channels, went to streaming services, and in the
Mm-hmm.
process basically lost this wide array of channels, right? So I think that's why there's a lot of appetite for fast in North America, and not necessarily something we see in other parts of the world, right? If you look
Mm-hmm.
at Europe, most of the channels today are still delivered using broadcast, right? So terrestrial broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
over the year is still very strong, and I would say it's not necessarily the same dynamic. What is interesting in this, though, in the fast ecosystem, is the emergence of those new fast aggregators, right? The likes
Mm-hmm.
of Molotov TV in France, the likes of Samsung
Mm-hmm.
TV Plus, globally Pluto TV as well, right? So being able
Of
to
course.
aggregate fast and bring them to the market, I think this is something new, something that is different from what we used to see. So I
Mm.
think something worth
That's
recognizing.
fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating that across Europe, for example, I am aware that broadcast TV and even satellite, like in Latin America, for example, direct to home, satellite is a very, very common distribution mechanism. So does that mean that, but yet there's still streaming services in those markets? So does that mean then that the viewers are relying on more for like movies and special interest content and, kind of, premium or niche? Is that the split of consumption or?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because fast typically started with lower or lowish value of content, right? One good use
Well, it
case
was
of
because the
fast that we see,
CPMs couldn't justify the premiums, right?
it
The
is
cost
right.
of premium
You don't
content.
want to give away your premium content in a free fast channel, right? You're right. The CPM doesn't match it,
Yeah.
but it could be a very good mechanism, and we've seen that in a few places where you keep your premium content behind the subscription, right? So this is paid for content, and you give slightly lower value content in fast
Mhm.
with a view to bring people who are on the fringe of subscribing, to bring them into your proposition,
Mhm.
right? So it's a way to use fast as a way to do content delivery, the discovery, right? Content
Mhm.
discovery, the ability to say, okay, I'm going to show you something that you like, and guess what? I have a lot more once you pay and once you
Yeah.
subscribe to my services. So
Yeah.
that I think is a good use of fast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, it's very fascinating, to watch, and it's fun to kind of be at the front row seat. So maybe what you can do is tell us from a technology perspective. You are a technology provider.
Mhm.
And so, what are you bringing, and what do you need to bring to a content owner or to a telco? Somebody who says, "Hey, we want to do more personalized advertising. We want the option to be able to create maybe some new ad units." Which, by the way, is something that I think sometimes gets a little bit lost in this whole, fast is going to take over the world. Is that the focus then just becomes on, a lot of times the conversations I'm in that I've heard is, oh, will the CPM support, the content people want to watch or not? Can it really drive the revenue services need? So it kind of is all around ARPU type discussions, which, by the way, is very important. So, but what gets lost, I think, is the fact that you can create new ad units. You can create new experiences when you're personalizing. So maybe you can share with us what you guys have built and talk to us about what that looks like, how you're bringing that to telcos, and now with your SaaS platform to the market.
Yeah, sure. So in this world, right, we've seen obviously a ton of server-side ad insertion, SSAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the past we used to have ways of mixing basically broadcast and advertising using client-side technology, which works, but it's a little bit complex because every time you have to integrate into the device, and there's a little bit more sort of complexity around launching a second player above your main broadcast player. I mean, it's all doable. There are great success stories. Sky in the UK, for example, being one. Some of the IPTV providers in France have done that too, in collaboration with the TV channel. So this can be done. This works. This create value, right? Because you do
Mm-hmm.
targeted advertising. But the trend is definitely server-side advertising, right? So this
Yeah.
is what Disney, Netflix, Prime are all talking about, basically doing manifest manipulation server side. So I end up giving you, Mark, a manifest file that is different than the one I give to your neighbor, right? And within this manifest file, there will be an ad that is targeted to you, right? So for us, the SSAI, the server side ad insertion, is something that we believe has a lot of potential. You talked about ARPU, and I think, and CPMs, being related to that, because today advertising is sold on a number of insertions, right? The number of times this ad is going to be
Mm-hmm.
seen. And I think today a number of people are asking, is this really working, right? And during the preparation, we had those conversations. Is this really working? Can I make money with server-side ad insertion and doing targeted advertising in my stream? And I think this is where the debate is open. The jury is out. I
Yeah.
have, some views here. You have some views.
Yeah.
But one thing that sort of strikes me is, for example, Netflix here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Netflix in the UK. I live in London. Netflix in the UK, they retired their basic plan, right? So there was a $7.99 plan a month that you could subscribe to, and they retired it. You either have to go for the basic plan with ads, so that's $4.99 with ads, or a slightly higher plan. I think it's $10.99, and you get more streams, HD, 4K,
Mm-hmm.
and more streams. What is interesting is they retired it, so you're not able to subscribe to it, and that was a couple of months ago. What they're doing this month is actually moving people away from the basic plan automatically to the ad plan, to the $4.99 plan, right? And I think that's an interesting clue as of the money Netflix makes on average per subscriber per month, because that would indicate that they make at least £3 on average per subscriber per month with
Yeah,
the ad
exactly.
plan,
They're
right?
not going to
That's an
migrate
interesting one, right?
people if it's taking money out of their pocket, you would assume, in any way. I mean, I guess there always can be some strategies, that
Yeah.
maybe, but yes,
Unless they
it's
wanted to
fast.
grow, the base of ads
Yeah.
to become more interesting to large advertisers. But
Yeah,
generally speaking,
exactly.
they see the value,
Exactly.
right?
There can be, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very good point. And this is something else too, is that it's easy for this discussion to get to get stuck in kind of a zero or a one. But meaning like with ads or without ads,
Mhm.
so but I think we forget that, or some of us maybe have forgotten, because it's been a while since we've had a pay TV subscription in the US. That kind of pay TV equals cable, even though satellite, in its heyday, was tens of millions of subscribe of viewers,
It's huge. Yeah,
viewed their
absolutely. Yeah.
content from satellite. But what's fascinating is those were always dual revenue models. You know, they sold
Mhm.
advertising, they got the platform sold, so Comcast cable company, had ad units that they monetized. At the same time, I was paying every month, you know and so it always was dual revenue. So I think that clearly is the direction, that why would the OTT streaming services not go that way?
It's a good point.
And for
Yeah.
the big brands, the Warner Brothers, so HBO, the Disneys of the world, the Netflix of the world, these brands are so powerful that these media brands, media companies, platforms, that, yeah, one could naturally assume that over time CPMs are going to increase. The viewers are going to become more valuable. Now, I think where the rub is, and this is where we had a little bit of a spirited debate, and I know others in the industry are on one side or the other, is, but that doesn't translate to the local, in the US. Again, it's a very fragmented cable market, or telco market. But so there's a small town with a local pay TV company in a rural town in America. They suddenly can't launch a fast service and just start minting money. The
Yeah.
the viewers are not as valuable, meaning that the CPMs, are going to be lower. Their base is not so big. And then you can translate that across all of the various consumer devices, where advertising is now, oh, this comes with free content. But you look at the content, you look at kind of the quality of the device, and it just The CPMs aren't, they're a struggle, so they're not Netflix,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and it's a game.
what
It's
are your
interesting.
thoughts
You're
around
making a good
that?
point here, right here, Mark. Because the advertising game is about making the pie big enough to be interesting for advertisers, right? And you're right. Someone that has a
Yeah,
small audience is not interesting for advertisers. We
exactly.
see, for example, in telco world, and telcos are a bit different in Europe than in the US, because
Mm,
in North America they have the ability to insert local ads, right? So there is a
yes,
percentage of inventory that is basically monetized directly by your cable company if you buy if
that's
you still
right.
buy your
Yeah.
cable services. It's not the case in Europe, right? It remains with the content owner, right? So the only
Mm,
thing that a telco can do is help the content owner insert ads using, the platform if we do client-side advertising,
yeah.
or using potentially first-party data, right? So telcos have a ton of data about us as subscribers, and they can
Yeah.
use that to help, someone insert better ads, which I think is a good model, right? So
Mm,
we see some of that. I think what is interesting when we go back to CPMS is there's definitely a decline of the traditional broadcast TV, right? When the way we used to see ads being sold based on the audience, right? So I'm
yeah.
L'Oreal, I'm going to target the latest makeup, you know.
18 to 54 age group,
This is it. Yeah, this is
that
it. Yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
surprised me.
And
Like,
it's based on the ratings. So I have to trust the
yeah,
ratings to know
yeah,
that I'm going to be hitting the right target. And we know this is eroding pretty quickly, right? Because,
that's right.
we've targeted, I can actually identify the people that I want to target and do a better job. I reduce the wastage, right? I'm not showing, you or myself the latest Maybelline ads from L'Oreal, right? That's
Yeah.
something that, probably is not interesting for
Yeah.
neither of us, but
Not so much for me. My wife,
not so
yeah,
much.
of course, but
And this is why
uh,
streaming is strong, right? Because with streaming, we logged in, right? So when you're on Netflix, when you're on Disney, you logged in, and typically they know who's behind the screen.
mhm,
Something that was not possible before with broadcast, right? I would have
that's
to
right.
send, an ad
Yeah,
and hope that I hit the target,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
yeah, I think streaming has a lot of potential. I think the CPMS should be increasing and definitely doing better targeting, so
Hmm.
using more data when it becomes available. Things like we mentioned the first party data. We've seen also, to your point earlier about the small providers, we've seen also telcos working together, say, you know what, let's not try and compete when it comes to advertising, let's grow the pie together,
Hmm.
let's make this
Hmm.
market bigger so we attract larger advertisers into the
Hmm.
platform. So it's a dynamic that we typically don't see with telcos. They used to fight a lot, right, together,
Hmm.
but here they realize that it's in their mutual benefit to work
Hmm.
together against, some of the large
Yeah,
digital platforms, the
yeah,
Meta,
yeah,
the YouTube of this world.
yeah. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about what you have built and what your tech stack looks like, what your solution looks like for advertising. I think one
Yeah.
of the things that, at least it surprised me, but I know a lot of people have been really caught off guard at actually how complex the advertising tech stack is, and many not only just the technologies and the way that it functions, it's actually quite complex, but the partners, the platforms that are involved, so yeah, did you build your own, or did you partner, or is it a combination, or
Yeah,
tell us
that's
about
a
what
really
you
good
bring to the
that's
market.
a good point. It's been a journey, right? Because again, we come from telco land, so we've done
Yeah.
advertising in the past with telcos. We would deploy software on a server that would live inside a telco network to do
Mm,
ad insertion. Great. We moved this basically to the cloud. I said that already. So we run today on AWS. We run the SaaS on AWS, but it's software basically that is written and developed and deployed by Broadpeak, right? So it's the same
mm,
software that can go inside the telco network or that will go inside the SaaS
mm.
proposition. So it's all in-house. The interesting thing with advertising, it's a completely different set of partners than with traditional video, right?
Yeah,
Traditional
that's
video,
right.
maybe you work with different players, different encoders, different,
Yeah,
back office. When it comes to advertising, it's completely different, right? You have to work with, the company is going to measure if the ads are being seen, right? The
that's
beaconing that
right.
tells you if
That's
the ad has
right.
been seen, 25%, 50%. You work
Yeah.
with advertising campaign managers, that
Mhm.
will decide which ads are going in. So you find different set of standards, different set of partners to work with. So it's been a bit of a learning curve. But what we're trying to do today is basically position ourselves as the one-stop shop. If you want to do advertising, come to us, and we will deliver to you those this SSAI experience, and we can work with your partner of choice when it comes to ad management, and inventory management, clients. I mean, you find a number of standards here that help plugging this intelligence in the middle to start basically monetizing your inventory.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Well, let's get to actually talk about some use cases and some specific platforms that you're helping. And I know in the description we mentioned TF1. TF1
yeah.
Plus. So so for those of us that aren't familiar, what is TF1, and then let's talk about what you're doing with them. And
so TF1 is a traditional TV channels, right? They've been around for a long time, I think, probably about 50 years, maybe more. And the traditional TV channel is the first private broadcaster in France, right? So that means that they're not funded by like some others, by a public tax. They're only funded by advertising, right? And their revenues on advertising is about 1.6 billion euros every year, right? So that's they know a thing or two about advertising. But it is interesting, like everybody else. If you look across the board, all the broadcasters today, all the TV channels, they work with a pool of advertisers that have more and more options to spend their money. Right, so L'Oreal, we mentioned earlier, used to spend a ton of money with traditional TV because they have a mass market product, and it makes sense for them to go onto the TV. And yes, it would be a broadcast ad before, and now they have more options. They can do the targeted we talked about. They can do digital as well. They can go on the web, right? And I think we have a graph showing how quickly the digital against TV, traditional TV, is eroding. We can put this up if it's relevant. Here we go. Yeah, so digital TV and traditional TV, you see they both sort of eroding, but quickly what you see is traditional TV going down faster, right? So TF1 is suffering from that, and that means that they have to do something, right? And the one thing that they've decided to do is, instead of being just a TV channel, part of an IPTV bundle or distributed over terrestrial TV, they wanted to become a streaming destination. Right. So the idea is very simple. You're probably like me, Mark. Sometimes you're not sure what to watch. You go onto Netflix, and then you start and you find something to watch on Netflix. Netflix is a streaming destination in this case, right? You're not sure what you're gonna watch, but you're gonna find something. They wanted to become exactly that, a streaming destination. So they launched on top of their main channel, so the main live channel, the news. They launched some fast channels that we talked about already. So a little bit of inventory that they have that they re-linearize and distribute. They launch also a lot of catch-up TV content. I think about 2,000 hours of catch-up. So anything that's been broadcasted can be available, I think, for about 2 weeks. A number of series, I think 2,000 titles of series and VOD. So they want to become this application you can go to, and they want to basically have a direct-to-consumer proposition. I think that's what it comes down to. So they want to control the delivery, the packaging, and the advertising, right? The monetization.
Interesting. And so right now, TF1 is distributed as part of some other. Traditionally, would be in a bundle, we would call it.
Correct.
But
yeah.
And they have never had a direct offer, or is this an expansion of something?
So they have a small, that's a good point. They have a small direct offer, right? Small direct offer, I think it's called My TF1 today. It's mostly catch up that you can go online. So you go onto the browser, you watch it. But if you go on TV, if you're going to consume the TF1 content on TV, typically it's either, again, broadcast or with, an IPTV bundle. Right. Yeah. And when you look at the revenues, it's quite interesting. I mentioned 1.6 billion for ads revenue. The part that comes from direct to consumer, so the My TF1 part, I think is only around 100 million. Right, so only 6% of that revenue is direct to consumer, right? And this is the part that they have to grow, because they know the 1.6 billion is going to shrink very quickly over time, right?
That's
so the strategy is to go there with TF1 Plus, grow this as quickly as they can, right?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and I think your product is it called Click2 that you have?
Yeah, so we've done a few things with TF1. Click 2 is in the works and something that we maybe I will talk about a little later. The one thing that we launched with TF1 is this idea of doing spot to spot replacement. Right. So
Yeah, that
today,
was
when you do
interesting to me.
linear,
So let's talk about it.
it is an interesting one, right? Because typically when you do advertising, you can do replacement of linear ads, right? So I have
Yeah,
my live TV
yeah,
channel, and I know it's halftime during the football or the soccer, whatever you prefer, right?
yeah.
And I'm going to change all the ads during that break.
Hmm.
That's fine. I can take the pod and replace all the ads. That's absolutely fine. But in the case of TF1, they worked out that in some cases, maybe they don't want to change all the ads. Maybe they only want to change certain ads,
Hmm.
and the ones they typically want to keep is the first one. So when you move
Yeah,
from the game into the ads, the first one is worth a lot of money.
it's
Typically,
worth a lot of
advertisers pay
money.
more
Yeah, yeah,
because people are engaged, right? People,
yeah,
advertisers are buying engagement, attention. That's what they
yeah,
buy, right?
yeah,
So the first one is worth a lot. The last one is also worth a lot because people, they take a break, they go make a cup of coffee or
yeah,
whatever, they come
yeah,
back to watch the game and they're ready. So the last
yeah.
ad before the game restarts is worth a lot of money. So those sort of bookends ads are probably the ones you want to keep. And then in the middle, you want to replace ads with
Hmm.
something that is more targeted, something that's going to bring you more revenue
Sure.
as a TV channel. And here, the numbers we got from TF1 are quite interesting. They talk about a CPM that can be 3 to 4 times higher than the
Wow,
traditional revenues they make, right? So
wow,
this is
wow.
becoming interesting, right? Yeah.
Wow, wow, yeah, yeah. And so you are bringing them the solution that would allow them, as you said, to retain that first and that last ad, but then in the
Yeah,
middle, if there's two or three other spots that are being shown, you could replace those.
that's
That's
correct. Yeah,
very,
yeah, yeah.
very, very interesting. Now,
And that's something many sorry,
yeah,
Mark,
go
if
ahead.
you
No,
allow
go
me,
ahead.
that's something that is, I think, is going to become very important across the broadcasting landscape, right? Because
Yeah,
a lot of the
yeah,
TV channels are suffering, their revenues are eroding, and they
yeah,
need ways to increase
yeah,
their ad revenue.
yeah.
I live in the UK. Channel 4, for example, here in the UK, they saw their ads revenue
Mhm.
drop by 20% last
Mm,
year, and
mm.
that's massive, right?
Wow,
This is
that's
the
yeah,
sort of things that
yeah,
impacts them pretty badly. So
yeah.
so yeah, I think we're
Mm,
going to see this across the board, and TF1 being one of the first movers, I think is going to trigger probably a chain reaction of other broadcasters trying to do the same thing, right?
yeah, interesting. A question that I have, I think I have seen, I should have pulled it up. So I'm just going off memory. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. But Broad Peak has partnered with other vendors in the space, right? Where you're bringing even this ad solution, or maybe you're
Mhm.
putting together some bespoke ad solutions. So your head is nodding. So that's a yes.
It is, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
okay? Why? So curious. Why partner? Why not just go grab that business yourself? And what are the dynamics there? Because the real question that I have, and I'm very interested in your response, is, I am observing. I thought NAB was remarkable. I commented a few times. I said NAB was the show where if you weren't partnered with somebody, you were the odd company out. I mean, you think of
It's
how
true.
many.
It's
I
true.
mean, you'd walk by. I'm thinking of. I won't name them, but a couple companies who were competing, directly to grab with Microsoft shutting down the Azure Media Services,
Azure, yeah,
and
yeah,
there were multiple vendors in there, trying to buy for hey, and two of them I think even put out a press release together saying,
yeah, yeah.
or
I know
maybe
the
it was
ones you're
something on
talking
their
about. Yeah,
website,
yeah.
but anyway, it was super fascinating what I saw. So talk to us about what Broad Peak is doing, with other vendors, and what the dynamics are there. At times you surely are competing with some of these partners, and at the other times you're saying, hey, let's come together, and we can
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can we can win this. So
Yeah, you and I have been in this business long enough to know that it's full of frenemies and co-competitors, right? One day you compete, the next
exactly,
day
yeah.
you
I
cooperate.
like to call it co-opetition. It's like,
Co-petition,
hey,
yeah,
let's find a way to
co-petition, yeah.
work together, but really we're both going to go try and win this individually, but
Yeah,
we're
we
going to be
leave this on the
working
side,
together.
and on this part we'll work together. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
you make a good point too around NAB. That was also my feeling. A lot of
Yeah,
companies
wasn't it
looking to
amazing?
do pre-integration, trying to,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's, the underlying reason for me is probably trying to reduce cost, right? Trying to be more
Mm,
integrated, trying to
mm,
reduce basically a complexity of integrations, delays around
yeah.
integration,
Mm,
and at the end, make it a shorter time to revenue, right?
yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's probably the underlying sort of current we see underneath. But yeah, like many other companies, we have to work with sometimes a competitor. I think what is interesting here is the world is changing, right? So we talked about
Mm,
fast, we talked about pay TV, and everybody's playing to their strength, right? So
yeah.
what we're seeing is through our sort of strong relationship with telcos, we've been able to do things that we didn't think we would do, right? I'll give you an example. We've been working with fast aggregators, right? So companies who have a number of fast channels that they
Hmm.
distribute to various OTT platforms. Well, guess what? Those interesting fast channels. Let's take, maybe 20, um, channels based around specific themes, like, I don't
Hmm.
know, maybe racing, maybe,
Hmm.
hunting, specific themes.
Sure.
Those 20 channels are actually interesting for telcos to augment and to broaden their pay TV proposition, right? So the telcos are actually interested in bringing on some of those channels to make their pay TV proposition broader, right? So that's
Mm.
something kind of interesting where, okay, we're good with telcos, we have those relationships in place, and we're able to work with those partners and say, look,
Yeah.
if you use our manifest manipulation and server-side insertion for your fast services, we'll bring you into our customers as well. So
Mhm.
it's a very dynamic environment, and there's a lot still to learn. I think, right? We haven't seen the
Yes.
final result yet.
Yeah. 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 Well, this is really also very typical of what happens where, and this happens in technology, right? Where individual solutions are formed, technologies, and companies go out and they build, point solutions, right?
Mhm.
But in time, the market and both driven from the customer side because it's a real pain to go try and have to integrate and deal with and understand 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, different companies, products, solutions. So they say, bring me a full solution, so that's on the customer side. On the vendor
Yeah,
side, people say, wait, hang on, we're doing really well. And, if we just added these three other things, we could charge more and we could add more value. But what's super fascinating is I've noticed that there's this trend and it tends to be on, I don't even want to put, like how many year cycle, but, we can go back and just do a little bit of analysis where all these individual solutions are brought to market and then they consolidate and then they break apart again and
and
then
they
they
split again. Yeah,
consolidate and then they break
yeah,
apart again. And it's and isn't it fascinating that even now on the content side, we've been talking for years about breaking up the bundle, right? And how it was going to
yeah.
be it was just going to be amazing. And yet what's happening now? The
What are
bundle
we
is
doing now?
coming
Yeah,
back. These
we're
services,
rebundling. Yes.
yeah, we're rebundling now. In some cases, it's creating kind of a new thing. But this whole idea of like, oh, I can literally pick and choose, these three channels here and this one channel here, and that consumers are like, just give me a,
It's too
just bring
confusing.
me
Yeah,
a content package, that I can sit down and I can consume. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Too
it's
many options,
fascinating
right?
on the
Yeah,
vendor side, and on the platform side that. I'm seeing there is a breaking apart on one hand, where, for example, some of the bespoke end-to-end SaaS platforms are transforming, or some of the businesses are
yep.
struggling actually because people are moving off of them. At the same time, nobody has all of the pieces, and so all the companies need to kind of come together and say, okay, we're going to pre-integrate, we're going to go to the market with a solution, we'll handle these two pieces, you'll handle this one piece, a third party will handle these two others. So it's I have no opinion as to whether that is better, indifferent, or worse for the end customer. But it's just a trend.
I
It's
think
what's
it's good,
happening.
right? I think it's good. It's more options, right? And I think we're
Yeah.
all being forced, in a way, to think solutions for two reasons. First one is, yes, cost. We have to make it more cost effective
Well,
and more
customers are telling us
integrated.
that very plainly, right?
I think that's
There's
very clear. The
there's
second
nobody
one
who's
is,
in the market saying, "Yeah, my OpEx, my
make it more
CapEx."
complex for me, please.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can keep spending the same. There's nobody.
No. So we have to do more with less, right? I think that's the first thing. The second one, I think, is we all move to cloud-based solutions, right? And
Yeah.
whenever you store something in the cloud, it's cheap to put content in and to, run whatever process you want to run in the cloud. But when you leave this cloud, you typically have to pay data transfer out, right? Exit fees or
Yes. Yes.
egress cost, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing you can't do is take content from one cloud to the other and then back into a third CDN, for example, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I think naturally it's forcing all of us to basically standardize on solution that would live in one cloud, or that will be
That's
on one
right.
platform, or for
Yeah.
us as a vendor to try and do everything, which is what you're starting to see vendors saying, okay,
Yeah.
come to me and I will do everything end to end for you. Whereas before there was more of the best of breed approach. I'm very good at this, I'm going to focus on this part. So I think here we might see more more changes, potentially some merge and acquisition again this year. I think it's
Hmm.
it's on the cards. So it's going to be interesting, right? With the landscape
Yeah.
shifting and everybody trying to do everything, there's not going to be enough space for everyone, right?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Okay, well, let's switch into some questions. When somebody registers, we actually give them a little space to type,
Mhm.
questions, and we actually have, I don't know, 6 or 8 here, so this is good.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just going to go down these and let's have a little dialogue about it. So the first one, in no particular order, I'm just reading on what I've got
Mhm.
on the screen here, is which business models do you suggest supporting? So
Yes, that's a,
I think
that's a
it's
good one.
clear where your head's at there, but yeah, how would
No,
you
it's,
answer
it's a good
that?
one. It's definitely, again, advertising is there and advertising is going to grow, but I think not in the current form, right? One
Mhm.
thing we started to see is basically we compete on TV with digital advertising, so advertising from websites. And if you look at to go back to TF1 for a
Mhm.
moment, they work with about, I think, 1,500 advertisers, right? That's the number of brands that actually
Mhm.
advertise on
Mhm.
TV today in France.
Mhm.
um, if you look at Meta, I think it's 500,000
Yeah.
advertisers that they have in France. 10 million advertisers globally, 500,000
Yeah.
in France, right? So that tells you
Yeah.
there's I think the ratio of 30 times more advertisers on Meta than
Mhm.
on TF1. And this is, I think, a pool of potential, right? If we can
Yeah.
bring those advertisers back
Yeah.
into the TV, then we have something interesting. So the
Yeah.
business model here has to change. We can't be selling based on impression, on CPM, number of impression. We
Yeah.
have to move to a more
Yeah.
of a performance base. So on the
Yeah.
web, you buy clicks. On TV, you'll buy something similar, shoppable ads and interactive ads when you do
Yeah.
click to basket or you do click to, notification on your phone, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. But that's
Mhm.
the way to basically give a very clear return on investment for anybody who wants to advertise on TV. Because
Mhm.
today, you said it before, it's a little bit risky, right? You rely on, the CPM or the ratings
Mhm.
to tell you that you
Yeah,
hit your
that's
target.
right.
Here, when you move to the performance world, and that's where the click-to
Yeah.
solution we
Yeah.
briefly alluded to comes in. That's why we can actually demonstrate that yes, it will make sense for you to advertise
Yeah.
more, because whenever
Yeah.
you spend more money, you
Yeah.
turn it into more profit for yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I really agree with what you just said. I think again, when we're talking, about fast and monetization, it's very important to think, there's the CPM model, the business
Mhm.
model that's underlying just this, you know, I would argue that sometimes it feels arbitrary as to how in the world that number exists, but there's basically a number for 1,000 impressions,
Yeah.
views. So that's CPM. When you go to performance, Wow. Not only does that now engage the user, because by very definition, the user is doing something. That's why it's called performance
Yeah,
advertising, right? Versus just sitting there and, or like, getting coffee and not even looking at the screen, or muting the audio and not even hearing
yeah,
the
yeah,
ad. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so
Because
yeah,
at the
I
end, as an
think
advertiser,
that's
that's what you want. You want attention, right? You don't want your ad to
exactly,
be muted
exactly.
or the
Yeah,
guy not being in
yeah,
front of the TV. You want, someone
yeah,
paying attention to it. And if you can
yeah,
target
yeah,
it and make it relevant, then I think you create a model that is basically,
yeah,
it's a positive model because you
yeah,
end up doing
yeah.
better targeting with better clicks. And as you click more, the advertisers see the better return on investment,
Sure,
and then you can
sure.
refine your targeting. So there's a good sort of positive circle
Yeah,
reinforcement into this, right?
for sure, for sure. Okay, the next question. This is interesting. This actually came from California State University. Bernie wrote in and he said, "So, what are my hardware requirements?" Now, I don't have any, so I'm going to assume, let's just
Mhm.
assume that, it's okay. What's required to do this? Like getting back to again, what's required to do to run this ad tech. And you have a SaaS
Yeah.
platform, so talk about that maybe, but how
Yeah,
does,
sure. So it used to be, in the old telco world, it used to be that you had to source hardware and
yeah,
then, line up with us. We would install it, commission it, get it
yeah,
delivered.
yeah,
All of this is gone, right? We actually have telcos who use the SaaS proposition to start to
mhm.
get off the ground faster.
Yeah,
So SaaS platform is available. You can go on it today. It's called broadpeak.io. It gives you, I think, a free trial for 2 or 3 weeks. So
mm,
you're very welcome to play with the platform. It's all available online. It's a pay as you use platform. So the more impressions you're going to be doing, the more money you're going to be spending with us, but you can start with very modest budget. In terms of hardware, you don't find anything special there. It's traditional compute
mhm,
requirements because here we don't store the video. We only basically put together the manifest file, so this index with the different
yeah, yeah.
files inside. And yeah, there's nothing really specific around the hardware,
Okay,
right? It's
so
more
how do
how
you
you consume it
integrate?
that becomes interesting.
So that's actually a good question. So if I'm running a platform today, which
Mhm.
probably 100% of your customers are, right? I'm just assuming that almost nobody is starting from the ground up. How do you integrate your solution? Is it API based or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, so broadpeak.io is full API based, right? And it's one of those modern proposition when all the documentation is online and available. So it's nice to see that. I think that's where this industry is heading. It's all API based. What you need is basically to have markers in your content to know where
Yeah,
we're going to be putting the ads.
yeah.
So typically Scotty 35
Scuddy 35.
markers. Yeah, so we can basically listen to that on the origin server, create a manifest file that says, okay, those are the time where we're going to be able to insert ads, and then
Yeah,
when a request comes in, we go to the ad server and then fetch the right ad
yeah.
based on the rules that you will decide, and then deliver this manifest file, and
Okay.
then you can use your traditional CDN or whatever mechanisms
Okay.
you use. There's no
Amazing.
dependency there.
Yeah, amazing. So this feeds exactly the very next question on the list here is how is I'm paraphrasing slightly because but I know what the person's asking, just the way it's written. They're asking about adaptive streaming and CDN setup or
Ah,
integration.
yes.
So yeah. So talk about that. Now, one of the questions that I have is, most people have a player now. A lot of times it's a commercial player that
Mhm.
they've licensed. What changes are needed on the player side? Are there changes that are needed? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it's the beauty of ABR and server-sided insertion, right? You deliver a playlist, and your
Yeah,
player doesn't even have to know that you're
yeah,
getting into
yeah,
ads, right? It's just gonna go
exactly.
and download the chunks. So this
Yeah,
this is straightforward. I think what is interesting is probably where you can also comment here, Mark. What is interesting is sometimes you need to transcode the ad, right? Because
yeah,
when you do programmatic, when
absolutely.
the ad is decided dynamically, you be pointed to an ad, and maybe your ad is in a different format than your
Yeah.
than your video playing,
Yeah.
right? So this is where there's a need sometimes for a little bit of transcoding. So you get the ad, you transcode it on the fly,
Hmm.
package it, and then deliver. You may not have enough time to do this in real time, so sometimes you miss the first impression of the ad. But then next time someone is
Yeah.
given the same ad, then you have it available. And I think
It'll
that's also
be
something you guys do, right?
optimized. It is, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We're seeing very, very high demand for ASICs in exactly this use
Mhm.
case, because they need it to be faster than real
Do
time.
it as quickly as possible.
And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, it's a very good use case. Okay. There's another, yeah, it's just not enough. I don't understand what the question is, but another one about hardware. Seems like a lot of people are wondering. I think the essence of these questions around hardware is, is there something special required? And the short answer is no, because it's software running on x86.
Yeah.
You could run that in your own data center. You could run that on a cloud instance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's no. That's the beauty of it, right? We had. I was a CTO at the last IBC of a cable company in Europe, and he said, "Oh, I really like to try advertising. When can we start?" I was like, "Start now. Maybe not today. We were in the bar, right, in
yeah,
Amsterdam, so maybe not now, but start tomorrow. Start tomorrow. The
yeah,
platform is available. You control your feed. It's your content. They have their own channels there.
yeah,
If you have those markers in, you can start testing it tomorrow, and if it works, you launch it, you measure how much money you make for a month, and you can
yeah,
prove that targeted ads will make you more money than your traditional linear ads, right?
yeah,
So it's that simple. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, here's an analyst. I won't name their firm, but they're I think somewhat known in the space. Um, his question is, how should broadcasters prioritize what streaming technology to invest in? That's an interesting question. So, what are your
That's a
thoughts
broad
there?
question. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. um I think there are a number of things, right? The first one, I think for me, you need a quality of experience, right? So before, having ads and monetizing and all that, if you don't have a good quality of experience, people just don't use your service, right? We know that it's been proven. I
yeah,
think Akamai had some really good research saying if you mess up the experience more than twice within one session, people will leave. And if it happens too often, people will just leave the service altogether, right?
yeah.
So we know
That's
experience is super important. Experience comes in with a number of, I think, angles. One of them being the quality, obviously, on the screen. So you need,
right.
good visual quality. You need
Mhm,
a stream that's reliable, that doesn't break, that doesn't fall into
mhm,
various errors. The latency can be very important if you do live sports, right? So that's
mhm,
something we see more and more people investing more into low latency. So
mhm,
upgrading their origin, their CDN, their players to do more latency. We've seen people asking questions about mixing low latency and ads, right? If you do something in
mhm.
programmatic, do you have enough time to go and get the ad and then plonk
Yeah,
it into the manifest? So that becomes
yeah,
some
right.
interesting questions. But yeah, for me, the first thing is probably quality of experience, because otherwise you don't have a service, right? So that's the
Yeah,
first thing
yeah.
to start. And then I would say, yeah, advertising is something you want to dip your toes in, at least, right? You want to be able
Mhm,
to say, okay, I understand the business model, I understand who makes money in advertising, and I understand how I can build a business case around that, right? The
mhm,
good thing with advertising, it's again a slightly different way of doing the business. You find more revenue share models, right?
mhm,
Companies like us saying, look, you will pay us if you make money, right? So if you have
mhm.
a ton of impressions, you're going to have a ton of consumption on our
Yeah,
platform, and you're only going to pay us at this point. We
yeah,
remove the sort of
yeah,
entries, the barriers we used to have, saying, "Oh, you need to spend money up front,"
yeah.
and then you may be recouping your investment later, right? So I think this is something positive, and that makes, I think, advertising something a lot easier to try than it used to be.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would agree with what you stated there. And then the last question, bringing the plane in for the landing, is and this actually is a good one too. So let's get out our crystal balls. Um, uh, how what is the future of linear TV? I think what the person's really asking here is, is it when's it going to be over? Is linear TV going to always be with us? So, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would probably split it into two parts, right? So linear experiences, they are to stay forever, right?
Yeah,
Watching the
of course.
same content together, the
Yeah,
sport,
yeah,
synchronized, low latency.
yeah.
This
With
is
your
going to stay,
friends, with
right?
your family, in a
Yeah.
bar, a restaurant, your home,
The
yeah,
engagement you get
that's
there
not
is
going away.
special.
Totally
This
agree.
is going to stay, right?
Yeah.
This is there to stay. What will change, I think, is the TV channels, right? The fact that today, if you watch a TV channel, there's not a lot of real life content inside the linear experience. A lot of the content you're watching is actually VOD assets that are put back in,
Yeah, sure.
into a playlist, right? And I think this is where things are going to change, especially around broadcast. Obviously, we've seen a lot of streaming appetite for streaming. I would say coming from consumers. You and I saying, "Oh, I don't want to watch this on a set-top box. I don't need a set-top box. I have an iPad. I have a
Yeah.
phone. I have a dongle I can use." So people are moving away from the set-top box. They want to move to streaming devices, and I think that that's
Mhm.
one element of it. Something we don't talk a lot about is the driver for the content providers, right? So
Mhm.
content providers also have the incentive to move to streaming because guess
Mhm.
what? It's easier to do advertising on streaming, and you can
Mhm.
unlock revenues using streaming and ads that
Mhm.
probably were harder to unlock using the traditional broadcast. So I think
Yeah.
broadcast is going to erode pretty quickly. Here in the UK, we already had the likes of BBC stating that by the end of the decade, they will stop broadcasting, which is quite funny for an entity that has broadcasting in its name, right? The
Yeah,
BBC.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but moving everything to IP, and I think this is going to become a real topic, right? So we started hearing conversations of, okay, what does that mean in 5 years, 10 years from
Mhm.
now, if we start to see TV channels that are simply leaving terrestrial TV to be only IP, right?
Mhm.
When does the traditional model of putting an antenna on the roof and having a distribution network dedicated to TV, when does this break? Is it when 10%, 20% of the channels stop using it? And I think this can
Yeah.
come quite quickly because today
Yeah.
channels, they have both costs, right? They have the CDN cost for OTT and they have the distribution cost for broadcast,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's
Yeah.
not necessarily a sustainable proposition.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Well, good. Well,
A lot more to say there.
yeah, yeah. Well, good. Well, Xavier, thank you again for joining us. Really enjoyed the conversation, and
Same here, Mark. Thank
I
you.
guess
Thank you to the audience as well.
if anybody wants more information, Broad Peak is easy to find online. It's broadpeak.tv. Is that your
That's
web?
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Broadpeak.tv. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, great. And obviously, netint.com. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.